بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So the last chapter we'll talk about is the firewalls. If you remember, we have mentioned firewalls before in different contexts. Where? حد فاكر؟ فين؟ Mobile device security elements اللي هو فين؟ أي chapter ده؟ في الوايرلس؟ IPsec exactly. IPsec ده كان بوضوح قلنا يعني اللي هو التانل مود بتستخدم between two firewalls or between two routers. صحيح. فين تاني اتكلمنا عليه؟ فين؟ اتكلمنا عليه في intrusion detection systems when we talked about rule based وكده فقلنا برضو rule based is one of the things that we use in firewalls. طب هو ايه الفايروالز؟ يعني هو ايه الفايروال؟ هل هي IPsec ولا هل هي intrusion detection؟ هي neither الحقيقة. هي هو الفايروال it's a device. It can actually use IPsec and in fact it can have some functionalities related to routing. يعني حتى some firewalls they support NAT اللي هو network address translation. We cannot consider it an intrusion detection node or intrusion detection device because it's actually more than this. It's not only for detecting, it's actually for providing some rule-based policies that based on which you can discard or block. It's not detection. It's not about detecting intrusion. It's about blocking traffic, or bypassing traffic. It's not it can be used as part of intrusion detection system to provide some rule-based policies. As part of a big intrusion detection system. ماشي? Or it can be used for IPsec to provide some tunneling و VPN وكده يعني. Okay?
هو نفس الراوتر.
هو الفايروول it's actually it can be used as a router. يعني كل الفانكشناليتي of the router it's built inside the firewall. So not only security and it's in fact كمان can be used for and this is one of the biggest functionality of firewalls اللي هو security logging. اللي هو logging يعني اللي هو audit records يعني. اوكي فهو يعني هو يعني حاجه كده يعني in between يعني. it has certain characteristics that's what we want to discuss in this chapter. ماشي طبعا internet connectivity is no longer optional وبتاع internet is we have طبعا اللي هو host based security mechanisms that we talked about in all the chapters starting from network access security بتاع IPsec transport layer security and but these are security mechanisms. These provide some level of security but as we said these are not enough. These are not guarantee that you will not be attacked. So you need other lines of defense. We talked about the fact that we need intrusion detection systems to actually detect that there is some kind of intrusion. Okay? And firewalls are also used to provide another level of protection. Not that to detect, لا to protect. يعني فيها prevention part, فيها blocking part. So while internet access providers or provides benefits to the organization, it enables the outside world to reach, interact وكده. This creates a threat. كل دي motivation ملهاش يعني قيمة. إن الفكرة إن الفايروول it's an alternative or at least a complement to the host-based security اللي احنا بنتكلم عنها. Host-based security starting from the network access layer security, IPsec, transport layer security, Kerberos, things like that. All of these are fine, but we need other complementary measures for protecting the networks. ماشي؟ طبعا is inserted between the premise of the network and the internet to establish a controlled link. So this means that يعني if you have a big network like this and then you have the firewall here. ماشي؟ It protects this entire premise. Sometimes you put the firewall inside. يعني it's not that it has to be one entry point to the entire network. So you can put it inside in the middle of the network as well to provide another level of protection inside. Because this will protect you from the outside attacks. But there is some internal attacks as well, which is what we discussed in intrusion detection systems. So sometimes you have to put the firewall inside as well to provide some kind of internal protection. So the aim of this perimeter اللي هو البريمتر اللي هو اللي بنتكلم عليه ده perimeter اللي هو المحيط بتاع النتورك بتاعتي ماشي is to protect the premise of the network from internet based attacks اللي هي attacks coming from outside from the internet. Okay. And it provides بقى a single choke point يعني معناها ايه it's one single entry point that will protect the network from any outside attacks. بس زي ما قلنا this is not the only thing or the only types of attacks. We also have some internal attacks. هتقول لي attacks تيجي من بره. لا, there is some internal attacks. That's what we discussed in intrusion. We said that you have مثلا you have the external user and also you have a misfeasor, you have a clandestine. Those are internal intruders. Those are internal people inside the organization and they can intrude. They can be part of an intrusion. Okay, so that's why you need to also protect the network from inside. ماشي؟ they can and auditing can be imposed. بمعنى إن هو one good thing about the firewall as well إن إحنا زي ما قلنا audit records في الintrusion. audit records are two types صح؟ لو ما فيش general audit records which are part of any vendor-based product like Blackboard كذا وكذا وكذا. To be able to use this for security, sometimes it doesn't give you enough information because these are not originally designed for security, صح? One good thing about firewall بقى إن هو it actually provides some logging related to security. Okay, so firewalls give you good security-based audit records, which are not based on vendor-specific product. Okay, this is based on all types of traffic that comes to the network, and it can log security-related information, which can be used for different things, for by intrusion detection, for different things. ماشي? It can be either a single computer or a set one or two systems زي ما احنا قلنا. You can put the firewall مثلا as a single entry point to the network, or you can put it inside the network as well to provide some internal protection for protecting the network against the internal attacks. ماشي؟ طيب firewalls are mainly يعني ايه rule based. There are different types which we will talk about, but these are rule based. So all traffic from inside to outside and vice versa must pass through the firewall اللي هو زي ما احنا قلنا اللي هو الايه entry point to the network. Only authorized traffic as defined by local security policy will be allowed. So it's very simple. A firewall, any incoming traffic, it applies certain policies or certain rules. Based on that, it says this traffic either will be stopped or will pass through. Okay? Based on what? Based on all these fields, which we talked about before. These are not new. So characteristics that firewall access policies could use include بقى some kind of IP and protocol-based fields. يعني basically you have the protocol data unit in different layers, starting from data link layer header, صح? And then you have network or IP header, and then transport or TCP header, and then you have the application header. Okay, so all these are protocol-based headers that the firewall can have some rules. So basically, مثلا certain MAC address will be stopped, or certain مثلا IP address. If you have طبعا source IP or destination IP, source port in the case of TCP, source port, destination port. So you can have any kind of combination of policies based on all these fields in any of the headers. Okay. طبعا certain types of firewalls, they don't look at the actual data of the application. Okay, so we'll talk about different types of firewalls. So this is IP and protocol values. These are any value in these headers. ماشي. application level protocol اللي هو اللي احنا اتكلمنا عليه اللي هو application header اللي هو مثلا HTTP telnet. Okay, So all these application level protocols, they have also some headers. So, and you can apply some rules on the application level headers. And we will talk about different types of firewalls. Each firewall focuses on certain scope within this protocol stack. The user identity بقى. The user identity, this is actually, is this part of any of the protocol level headers that we talked about, at least that we know about? Do we have the user identity as part of the protocol headers? We didn't study this in Network 1, صح? The user identity is usually part of the data, so you should send your user identity مثلا in terms of username, things like that, or if you use مثلا passwords, if you send passwords either hashed or plain text like telnet, you send this as part of the application data, صح? Not in the headers. Okay? There are certain types of firewalls that actually look at the actual data as well. Okay? So we'll talk about this. But in any case, the user identity is, يعني ممكن مثلا أقول إيه? Okay, so any traffic that comes for Muhammad now will be blocked. ليه محمد خلاص خرج من الشركة بتاع فخلاص I can put some policy that any traffic for certain band مثلا users ولا حاجة خلاص will be blocked. I can in fact control the access based on some considerations. يعني I don't have to apply مثلا rule per packet مثلا. I don't have to say so any مثلا incoming packet with a port number X will be blocked. I don't have to say that, but I can say that I cannot have مثلا 1,000 packets from the same source to the same destination in certain period of time. I can apply some rule like this. ماشي? So I can have some controlled access based on some considerations like time or request. يعني مثلا I can say certain type of traffic will not go through in certain times of the day. I can do this. Okay? So there are different policies or different criteria based on which I can design the rules for the firewall. So a firewall is actually a combination of all of this. And as we will see, it's actually a mix of multiple things. So it defines a single choke point, as we said, that keeps unauthorized users outside of the protected network. It prohibits potentially vulnerable services from entering or leaving the network and provides protection from various kind of IP spoofing. IP spoofing اللي هو إيه؟ اللي هو مثلا I'm trying to send from an IP which is not mine, but I'm trying to impersonate an IP بقى مش impersonate a person based on user ID. لا impersonate an IP that I know يعني مثلا يعني I'm from outside QU, okay? I'm sending a request from an IP address which is internal to QU. Okay? So some firewalls might actually be fooled by this because the firewall is supposed to protect against the outside IPs, صح? But the IP coming in the packet now is internal IP. Okay? So some firewalls might say, okay, so this is internal IP address, so pass it through. Okay? And when you pass it through, you find like somebody مثلا injection attack ولا حاجة زي كده. Okay? So IP spoofing is one of the يعني things that are used for يعني مثلا routing attacks. I can send from internal IP address, and then once the packet goes through, this packet in fact contains some network injection. It goes to a router, and the router should understand it as a routing update, so it updates the routing table and corrupts the whole thing, so the network becomes non-functional. Okay? And this is caused or facilitated by the fact that we do IP spoofing. Okay? Of course, طبعا, there is some mitigation for this, which we will talk about. It provides location for, and this is very, very important الحقيقة, for monitoring security-related events. That's a very good added value because we did not talk about in any of the vendor-based products, they do not necessarily report security-related events. Okay, they log events, but these are not security-related events per se. So firewalls, since they focus on security, they can provide some security-related events logging, which is important. ماشي. Is convenient platform for several internet functions that are not security related. Like what? They can actually act as a router. They can perform network access translation. They can provide some network management functionality. Okay, so so firewall, you can think of firewall as, in fact, as a gateway which can act as a router. Okay, so firewalls they can provide مثلا NAT. They can provide network management functionality. All these are not security related functions. ماشي? They can perform these. Okay. They can serve as a platform for IPsec, which is what we talked about in chapter 9. We said that we can implement the tunnel mode between two security firewalls. Okay, so firewalls can in fact use IPsec as well. Okay, so it's actually a combination of multiple things. What are the limitations of the firewall? They cannot protect against attacks that bypass the firewall. bypass the firewall. معنى مثلا يعني أنا حاطط مثلا أنا عندي network and there is the firewall like this. Okay. المفروض إن any traffic that goes from inside to outside or from outside to inside has to go through the router, and the router the firewall, and the firewall applies the policies to block or bypass the. So somebody bypassed this and he went through another. مثلا you have مثلا a modem here and he used that modem to dial أريد directly, not through the firewall. Okay. Alas, this traffic is not going through the firewall, therefore the firewall cannot block it. ماشي. So may not protect fully against internal threats. Internal threats اللي هي these are threats inside. هتقول لي ازاي؟ there are some مثلا internal users, they are مثلا they are mad about something, so they can in fact launch some attacks internal to the network. But the firewall is used to protect traffic when it goes through it. So anything that does not go through it, it cannot protect against it. Okay? So if somebody here is مثلا يعني واحد زي ما قلنا كده very famous example that we talked about in intruders, مثلا شخص terminated ولا he is leaving the organization, so he decided to launch some internal attacks. The firewall cannot do anything about it. So in that case, firewall cannot do anything. Cannot guard against wireless communications between local systems on different sides of the internal firewall. What that means is, as we said, يعني, we can have a firewall here, internal, okay? So in that case, you have some part of the system here and some part here, okay? So these could be two local networks and the firewall is in between. We can have firewalls internal to the network to protect against برضو internal attacks. We can have this. Okay, but somebody again used مثلا يعني مثلا كexample, very famous example. You have an access مثلا access point. So you have access point and the access point acts as a firewall. This is a very famous example. So the security rules can be implemented in access points. Okay, طيب. So this means that any traffic that goes to the access point will go automatically through the firewall. Okay, طيب. Somebody بقى ناصح بقى عمل ad hoc communication not through the access point. خلاص هتعمل له عشان كده ad hoc communication especially through Bluetooth. عشان كده most of the viruses, most of the يعني of the security hacking والattacks والحاجات دي comes from really peer to peer وحاجات اللي هي ad hoc. يعني دايما if there is some coordinator or centralized node, it's always good because you centralize the control in one node and you can manage this easily. You can make it very protected. You can design all the security rules. Be careful make it very immune from any penetration and so on and so forth. إنما هتيجي تعمل ad hoc خلاص يعني how can I control this? I communicate with Muhammad. خلاص the access point is not controlling this type of communication. Okay, So this is برضو a limitation. يعني anything that does not pass directly through the firewall ماشي it cannot be protected. خلاص يعني I cannot protect against these types of communication. So one of these communication is either someone is dialing through dialing directly the service provider without having to go through the actual firewall, or internally someone is doing some ad hoc communication without going through the infrastructure. ماشي? So these types of communication I cannot really guard against it. A laptop or a PDA that provides a storage may be used and infected outside. يعني مثلا أنا my laptop يعني I'm using it مثلا at home, and at home I downloaded some software and it happens to have a virus. Next day محمد قام جاي واخد البتاع وقام رايح QU. Now your virus أصبح إيه؟ internal inside QU. خلاص الفايروول مش هيعمل إيه؟ خلاص هو physically الراجل انتقل من بيتهم للنتورك ومعاه الفيروس بتاعه ومعاه كل حاجة خلاص. This virus will be spread widely spread.
How will QU deal with this problem?
ما هو بقى it deals with this in different mitigation techniques. يعني مثلا one of the ways إن هي they have to really make sure that your virus software is up to date وبتاع is detecting and so.
Policy server.
إيه؟ اللي هو البوليسي سيرفر اللي اتكلمنا عليه بالظبط as part of network access security أو this and that. These are some things that the university can do. But again, يعني there's no bulletproof solution for this. And particularly for the firewall, it cannot guard against these types of يعني intrusions or these types of infections. What can I do? يعني واحد physically outside, he got infected with a virus, and then inside, okay. So the only way I can say that, okay, so when you connect on the university مثلا network, I can check مثلا your virus software, is it up to date or not, and if it's not up to date, I will not allow you to connect. I can do this. Most of the service providers, they don't do this at least يعني rigorously. Okay, especially in an environment like university. If you apply this policy, honestly, maybe 70% of the students, they will not be able to use any service in the university. But they are really careful in applying this. Okay? So these are limitations. Type. What are about the different types of firewalls? This is very important. This is the core topic. طبعا firewall, as we said, يعني either it acts as a choke point to the internal network, or it can be in the middle of two networks to provide some kind of internal يعني protection. So what are the different types? احنا هنتكلم عليهم يعني first as a high level, and then we'll talk about them in details. The first one is what we call packet filtering firewall, and this is the basic one that we are aware of. It just defines certain rules. Simply, it says that any traffic comes from this IP to this IP, or from this port number to this port number, should be either bypassed or discarded. Okay? Simple rule like this. And these rules apply on a packet by packet basis. ماشي؟ يعني the incoming packet, it comes like this. I have access to the different headers. I have access to the data link layer header. I have access to the IP header. I have access to the TCP header. Those are the most common. Okay? So I can apply the rules based on a packet by packet basis. From this IP to this IP, from this port to this port, and so on. Okay? Either discard or bypass. ماشي؟ طيب. There is what we call stateful inspection. Stateful inspection, it does not apply on a packet by packet. لا بس it keeps some state. It keeps some state يعني إيه؟ يعني okay, so when you have incoming مثلا, let's say packet that's part of TCP connection establishment. So it keeps a state that now I have a TCP connection, okay, and this TCP connection has these parameters. IP port number, IP port number.
Same as logging?
Yes, but this is a state. يعني طبعا this will be in the logs for sure, but I keep a state, I keep a database of states of every connection passing through the firewall. I keep a state of every connection. Okay, why? Because then someone might send a packet مثلا from a specific IP address and a specific port which is not part of one of the existing connections. Okay? If I apply بس الباكيت filtering, I may actually bypass it. صح؟ But if I apply the states, لا, this packet is not part of one of the connections that I have in the database. So this is like a weird packet. Okay? So in that case, I will not pass it through. فهمنا الفرق؟ يبقى if you keep a state of all the connections, then you can admit the traffic that belongs to one of these connections only. Any packet, any incoming traffic that does not belong to these stateful connections, then I may not admit it. واضح كده؟ Packet filtering will admit it عادي يعني applies by packet by packet. إنما هنا I keep a state. ماشي؟ Again, so this is on a high level and then we'll talk more. The third one is what we call بقى application proxy firewall. Application proxy firewall. This بقى not only بقى it applies بقى rules on the application and يعني it doesn't only actually look at the data itself, it can actually change the data. Proxy احنا عارفين البروكسي صح؟ You know what proxy is. Proxy is it acts as a proxy. It acts as a representative to your traffic. يعني مثلا يعني if you want to access a particular website ماشي and you use a proxy server, what happens?
Sends the IP
of the proxy, exactly. So the connection to the website will not have your particular IP. No, it will have to go to the proxy. Okay, and then from the proxy it will go to the website. So the website, it finds that the traffic is coming from the proxy. It doesn't see your identity. It doesn't see your IP address at all. So why do we do this? Then sometimes some of the web servers, they admit or they accept مثلا requests that are coming from specific IPs. مثلا IPs مثلا within the country. Okay? So if you send your request directly from your machine, it will not allow it. يعني مثلا you are trying to مثلا access مثلا يعني an e-commerce website and you are trying مثلا to pay with your credit card and stuff like that. So it says no, you are outside the country. I will not allow you to purchase anything because there is some export control and. Okay? But if you connect through a proxy, so the website finds that the traffic is coming from the proxy. It doesn't come from the actual.
So what's the difference between VPN and proxy?
Exactly. I was gonna talk about this. Yes. Proxy does not necessarily use encryption. Proxy is not to be used within VPN or within مثلا encryption والauthentication والاشياء. All it does is that it takes the packet and then it's like NAT يعني مثلا او يعني بس it doesn't only change the IP. Change the IP, change the port. It may actually change the application content. But it's not part of it to encrypt ولا to do authentication ولا. This is not part of the proxy. واضح كده؟ So we'll talk about this. Similarly برضو الcircuit level proxy firewall بس هو ايه؟ It's from بقى ايه a lower side شوية. It's from it doesn't necessarily work on a specific application. يعني هنا application proxy it has to work within a certain application. مثلا يعني let's say web مثلا or HTTP. Okay? So it focuses only on HTTP application, HTTP type application. Okay? هنا بقى circuit level proxy it's a little bit lower level. So it talks about any application on مثلا TCP. ماشي؟ فthis can act lower level شوية. Again, we'll go in detail through each one. It becomes يعني ايه clearer. طيب, so this is for packet filtering example. This is a very يعني clear example. So rule A, it says that for any incoming معناه ايه؟ So you have a network and this is the firewall. So any traffic incoming. Okay? Yes, from outside to inside. Okay? This is inbound. They call it inbound. ماشي؟ From a source address that's external يعني أنا طبعا يعني هتقول لي هو how can I categorize an IP whether external or internal? I have a range of IPs. Remember subnetting? فاكرين subnetting? I have a range of IPs. I know the range of IPs within QU. So I know if the IP address that's coming, I know that it's from external IP to an internal IP, which means that it's coming to a specific service inside the network. And it uses TCP on port 25. Permit معناها خلاص pass it through. Why? Because somebody from outside is trying to check his email inside. So 25 is for SMTP. You remember يعني port numbers. This is one of the well-known port numbers لو تفتكروا. طيب هنا بقى outbound internal to external العكس بقى. Okay? And again it uses TCP and any port number which is more than فاكرين الرينج ده this is one of the ايه بقى اللي هم بنسميهم dynamic port numbers. And these are used by clients. So this means that actually one inside QU is trying to check his email مثلا on Gmail, Google مثلا. Okay? Okay. So in that case permit and so on. So from outside, for outbound برضو internal to external. So this is in that case there is someone inside is trying to access an email server outside. Okay? So for this one, someone from outside is trying to access an email server inside because the destination port is 25. معناها this is a well-known port. Okay? So معناها email server inside. Okay? إنما here, somebody is trying to access an email server outside. And port 25 معناها it's a well-known port. Someone is trying to access his email outside. So in that case, the email server is outside. And again, this is the client, so on the way back. Okay? Other than this, deny. I can have a default policy like this. The default policy is either deny or either bypass. يعني مثلا depending on the type of network. So in your home مثلا in your home network, okay, the default is always bypass. يعني خلاص I have some policies, but if it's none of these خلاص pass it through. Because my network is not that critical. بس مثلا network in a bank, usually the default policy is خلاص يعني default policy معناها deny. If it's not one of these rules, خلاص default policy is done. I can have that if the default policy is deny, these rules is for bypass. So everything else is deny except these rules. Or I can say the default is bypass, but anything with these characteristics will be blocked. يعني ممكن تبقى العكس. Okay? I can deny, and then this is a bypass. Okay? يعني I can have flexibility, deny or accept. I can have whatever combination. This is for type. إيه بقى the good thing about packet filtering is that it's very simple. It's the simplest type of firewall, rule-based وبتاع. I have a set of policies. I apply it packet by packet, and it's usually very, very fast. ماشي? Very fast. Because this application of rules is a very, very fast process. Okay? طيب, what are the weaknesses? Because the packet filter firewalls do not examine upper layer data, they do not look at the actual data. ماشي؟ عارفين اللي هو actual data اللي هو they only look at the headers. But the actual data itself, it doesn't look at it. And this is part of being fast. Because if I look at the data, then it will be يعني very slow. صح? So it's designed like this, which is good, but it cannot prevent attacks that employ بقى application specific vulnerabilities. يعني بالضبط حاجات بقى يعني specific مثلا to tell لا يعني even telnet ما هو فيها port number يعني فيها well known port number. I can disable مثلا البورت نمبر بتاع التلنت بس ممكن واحد يغير لي الديفولت بورت. They can change the default port and they can bypass you can do even IP spoofing. I can do IP spoofing and fool the packet filtering easily because it does not perform any kind of authentication. It doesn't look at the actual identity of the user. It doesn't look at this, right? Because we said the identity of the user is not stored in the header. It's stored in the actual data. Okay? Because of the limited information available to the firewall, the logging functionality present in packet filtering is also limited because again, here I can log something related to IP headers, TCP headers, things like that. I can report some security logs related to this. But again, I cannot مثلا say, oh, this is an HTTP request. I don't look at that. صح? Or this is HTTP submit or HTTP مثلا response. Okay, I don't look at that. Okay? I can say this مثلا packet is coming from this source IP to this destination IP and so on. So the logging is type. Most packet filter firewalls do not support advanced user authentication, which is what we talked about. It doesn't look at the application, hence it does not actually identify the user identity. It doesn't perform any type of authentication. This makes its functionality limited. So packet filter firewalls are generally vulnerable to attacks and exploits that take advantage of problems within TCP IP specifications, like مثلا IP spoofing. I can spoof the IP and send, as we said, send مثلا a request or a packet from an internal IP address, even though I'm external. And I can fool packet filtering, because packet filtering blindly apply rules. Okay? So I can fool it. Due to small number of variables used in the access control decisions, packet filters are susceptible to security breaches. يعني ايه؟ الrules, managing these rules might become a very hectic process. يعني you can apply مثلا millions of these rules. So after some time you will lose some of the rules يعني. And every day the traffic is very dynamic. So you managing these rules is very, very cumbersome. So in many cases, you don't have all the rules that provide 100% protection. So you always have holes in the firewall that allows people to slip in. Okay? So managing these rules is in general a very hectic and very big overhead. But what are the types of attacks? As we said, IP spoofing is very common. طيب عارفين IP spoofing. Okay, so how can I mitigate against it? The only way to mitigate against it is to say, that so I have the network and I have the firewall, okay, and someone is sending me a packet with a specific IP address, and this IP address he's spoofing, صح? So he's using an internal IP address. How can I detect this? احنا قلنا the firewalls can act as routers. So in a way you detect that this is coming from a specific interface. So you can apply a rule on a specific interface. And some firewalls, by the way, they have more than 2 interfaces, physical interfaces. Okay? So you say that if the internal IP address is coming on a specific interface, لا ده معناه ايه؟ He's fooling, he's trying to spoof, because this interface is in fact connected to the external network. It's not connected to the internal network.
Like a WAN.
Yes, like a WAN, بالظبط. So this is a WAN connection. You cannot use an internal IP address. تحاولش تذاكر عليها. You cannot use internal IP address from a WAN connection. You cannot do that. I can have some mitigation against it. طيب. Source routing attacks, this is very tricky شوية. Source routing, sometimes I send in the packet the complete path of how the packet should go. ما درسناش احنا الكلام ده في network 1. We did not study this. So in some source routing techniques, I can send a packet and say that this packet should go to node 1 and then node 3 and then node 4. I can put the entire route inside the packet. Okay? As we said, we did not study this. So how can I use this for attack?
Network packet?
Network packet, yes. Yes, network packet. So how can I use this for attack? As we said, you can have like some internal firewalls, right? All I need to do is just to send to try to go around it. So source routing can be used to try to bypass. خلاص الفايروول will not do anything. هيعمل ايه؟ There is بقى more intelligent attack. This is called tiny fragment attack. This tiny fragment attack بقى is very very smart really يعني. فاكرين we talked about the fragmentation in fragmentation. We talked about fragmentation as part of IP, right? We said that you have a big packet like this. You have the IP, okay, and this packet is very large, so we break it down into pieces. Tiny fragments, the attacker, what the attacker will do is that it will break it into tiny little small fragments type. Why? هو is smart. What he's trying to do is that مش احنا يعني after the IP comes which header comes after IP? TCP header, صح? TCP header, transport. So this is TCP header. Okay? So the firewall applies rules on the TCP header, صح? Applies the rule on a port number, input port number, ولا a destination port number, and so on, right? So if I divide the packet into small tiny fragments, okay? The fragment is actually part of the TCP header. شوف النصاحة. واخد بالك؟ It's part of the TCP header, okay? So what will pass through the firewall is a packet. هي packet. It's a well-defined packet. بس ال TCP header is not complete. So the firewall will be puzzled. And I don't see any input port or destination. I don't see anything because the packet is very, very small. So if the default policy is bypass, I'll slip in. خلاص. Okay? شفت النصاحة بقى؟ واخد بالك؟ And this is valid. يعني based on the networking protocols that we have studied, this is valid. I got a big packet and I broke it down into small pieces. I can do that. Okay? So that's one of the attacks. Type. What is the countermeasure? The countermeasure is to enforce a rule that the first fragment of a packet must contain the predefined minimum. يعني it has to have at least how many bytes the TCP header? 20 bytes. So the packet has to have at least 20 bytes. I apply this, and if it does not fulfill this minimum requirements, I will not bypass it. I will discard. ماشي كده? So these are the attacks. Stateful بقى, this is what we said. So in stateful, we keep track of all the connections, and the connections for us is a connection between two application endpoints, which is defined by source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, and this connection is current established. Why do we do this? Because if someone tries to send a packet which does not belong to any of these connections, I will not pass it through. Packet filtering will pass it through. صح? It deals with each packet separately, not as part of a connection. It doesn't keep state. صح? Here, لا. If a packet comes and it does not belong to any of these connections, I will not pass it. Type. We know the benefits. Okay, what is the disadvantage of this? Overhead, of course. Yeah, I have to keep track. I have to keep track of the states. تخيل انت بقى firewall, how many connections do we have? تخيل انت how many connections do we have at QU? Potentially millions of these connections. تخيل انت keeping track of all the states of all the connections that bypass through the firewall. That's why these firewalls, they can be software process that runs on anything. They can be. But usually this is merely packet filtering. When it comes to a stateful inspection والكلام ده, لا, this has to be hardware. It has to be a dedicated hardware. Because these have to be extremely fast. Because the complications here is enormous compared to just packet filtering. مفهوم كده يا شباب؟ تمام كده؟ طيب خلينا the application level gateway, we'll talk about this next time inshallah. So in application level gateways, as we said, it's different. It's in a different level.